Meteorologist Matthew East here, and this is the late October issuance of my 2011-2012 winter outlook. And if any adjustments need to be made, I'll put the final product out by the end of November. But again, as of late October, here's the ideas I'm going with. I'll present the overall concepts that kind of shape my forecast for the upcoming winter, and then I'll explain some of them as this edition of the video rolls along. Let me start off with some of the factors that weighed heavily on me as I was making the outlook for this winter. I am assuming a weak to moderate La Nina. I'll get into that here as this video unfolds. Also, we're sort of in a long-term overall negative phase of the NAO rather, and there are some spikes, up and down of that, but generally speaking, a long-term negative phase. I'll show you that in a second as well. A relative minimum in the sunspot activity continues, although there has been some uptick from where we were about a year ago, but still a relative minimum. Also, looking at what the October pattern has brought us, we've had quite a few eastern United States troughs and pretty good blasts of cold air from time to time. There's also been several big powerhouse storm systems, a lot of closed upper air lows as well. And the reason that's significant is a lot of time the pattern that occurs in October can repeat sometime during the winter. And overall, the PDO is in a cool phase, and that kind of factored into the weighing of some of my analogs. So without much further ado, let me get into the overall ideas I'm going with. Winter temperatures, now these are temperatures when you average out December, January, and February. Coldest across the northern tier into the northeast and parts of the mid-Atlantic. Near average temperatures overall for the Carolinas down into North Georgia. With that said, I'm sort of leaning in the direction of a colder than average December and maybe January and possibly an above average February. In terms of precipitation, above average in the northwestern U.S. and also the Great Lakes, the Ohio Valley into the northeast and down into the Virginias as well. Below average precip, desert southwest, southern plains, Gulf Coast, and down into Florida. Now let's talk about the La Nina. There's the sea surface temperature departures, and you're looking at cooler than average temperatures over much of the central and eastern equatorial Pacific. And in terms of the change in the weekly sea surface temperatures here, you certainly notice some cooling continuing in the eastern Pacific especially. Now, in terms of where the ENSO cycle is headed, notice here we are right now, and these are some of the various computer models and their forecasts of the ENSO number as we go forward in time. And what we're looking at here is there is the November, December, January. This is December, January, February, March. And the general idea here amongst most of the models is a weak to maybe moderate La Nina. Now, the CFS model actually really strengthens the La Nina, gets it down here, getting close to the strong La Nina territory. Again, my forecast is going with the idea of a weak to moderate La Nina, not quite as strong as what the CFS is printing out. Now let's go with the sunspot cycle, and we go all the way from 1750 at the top to current time at the bottom. And what we're looking at here is certainly a min in the sunspot numbers as we went through 2009 and 10. Although there's been an uptick recently, I still think we're in an overall minimum phase. So that plays a role. The NAO, this is looking at all the way from 1950 to current, and notice there's been a lot of negative NAO values here in recent years overall. And there are spikes of positive for sure, but an overall negative phase. This is sort of a better look at that. This is the standardized seasonal average of the NAO from 1950 through 2010, and there's a well-defined trend with this. Had a lot of negative values back here in the 50s and the 60s of the NAO. Then you had a lot of positive values from the mid-80s on through the early 2000s, and now we're on that downward trend again. And so my forecast for this winter kind of assumes an overall negative phase of the NAO, although there will certainly be spikes positive from time to time. Finally, the Arctic Oscillation, the AO, again, a lot of negative values. And the negative NAO and negative AO really drove the forecast around here for last winter, especially December and January. So I picked out a number of analog years, and I weighed more heavily the ones from the 50s, 60s, and 70s due to several factors: the cold phase, the PDO, as well as if you go back and look at this NAO chart I had here. Let me pull it up here again. If you go back and look at this, again, you had the overall negative phase of the NAO ongoing then during that time frame as well. So you average all the analog years I picked out together, again, weighing more heavily the ones from the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and that's the general idea. Warmer across the southeast than average, colder across the northern tier, and in terms of precipitation, overall drier than normal across the southeast, although there are some above average precipitation areas from parts of the Tennessee Valley up into the Appalachians. So that was kind of an idea I based off of, but again, let me show you the ideas I'm actually going with in the forecast, and there's the temperatures, and there's the precipitation. I'm going with basically a heavier influence from the NAO and the AO if you compared to just if you just looked at the analogs, and that's how I kind of got to the where I am with the current forecast. Two final things to show you here. This is the CFS model, and again, remember, it goes nuts with the La Nina, so consider that. But there's December 2011. I know this is probably tough to see on the video, but there's December, colder than average across the east, close to and then a little above average in January, and then well above average in February. Those are temperatures, and here's precipitation, and it's pretty dry across the southeast, as you might expect, since it really does crank the La Nina. All right, so that is it in terms of this late October version of the winter outlook. If any changes need to be made, again, I'll do that by the end of November. But for the time being, that is what I'm going with. All right, thanks for watching, and have a great winter. Hope you get the type of weather you're looking for, and God bless.